You can all join palms and repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
Keeping the palms joined. Put the palms down. All right, good evening, everyone. Nice to see you all. Thank you for showing up. Anyone here for the first time? What brings you here? Your friend. You're visiting from where?
From Tahoe.
Right on. Well, welcome.
Thank you.
And do I dare ask what your friend said to get you here?
Do you want to come?
Pretty simple, right? We're always just that easy, you know? Well, I'm glad you said yes, so welcome. A few other hands in the back. What brings you here? Yeah?
I have a school project.
Nice.
Class.
For which? World Religions? School project. Yeah. All of you, there's a little group there hiding in the back corner.
Moral support.
Moral support. Wait, who's the moral support one? You're the one who's in.
I'm her mom, making sure that the tuition is going.
You're the mom making sure that, I'm just sharing this for our millions of YouTube followers. You're the mom making sure the tuition is going to the right place for her education. But you, mom, what's your name so I don't call you mom the whole time? Carla. I have a warning for you. So, what is this, 2025? 22 years ago, I went with my oldest, bestest friend to do this exact same thing for moral support. So you, Carla, yeah.
You may see me here.
Yeah. She's going to be fine. You, on the other hand, you might be stuck. Well, I'm glad you're here. I appreciate it. And that is a true story. That's how I ended up in the temple for the very first time 22 years ago down the street at a Taiwanese Buddhist temple. My best friend was going through a teacher credential program at San Diego State, and they had to go observe a different religious practice from what they were used to, what they grew up with. And so she said, Jeff, you always say you're Buddhist, you read Buddhist stuff, you've never even been to a temple. You know, she was just calling me on all my crap. And she said, do you want to go with me? And so I went, and in so many ways, I've truly never left. So yes, you've been warned. What else? Anyone here for the first time? Yeah, what brings you here? Welcome.
I'm traveling from Colorado, but meditation is like part of my everyday practice.
Beautiful. Do you have a lot of Buddhist stuff in Colorado? Do you have a space out there, Shambhala, or anywhere you go?
I actually go to Naropa University.
Yeah. Oh, very cool. I'm very familiar with Naropa. Yeah. How do you like it?
I love it.
Yeah.
It's like one of the best decisions I made.
Yeah. Yeah, so obviously, as you know, all that Trungpa, I've studied Trungpa for many years, so all of that started by Trungpa.
I just finished my first year of graduate school, so yeah.
Yeah. Can you share with everybody what Naropa is in brief? Do you want to sum it up? Sorry to put you on the spot.
They take a very contemplative approach and incorporate Buddhism in their curriculum, which I enjoy. There's like different paths for the graduate school where I'm taking a mindfulness-based transpersonal management program. So mine's more of like, yes, it incorporates meditation, but not so much Buddhism. I like to keep my doors open to any and all religions and spiritualities, but there is one that is Buddhism informed, so that has a more primary focus on Buddhism, if that makes sense.
Beautiful. Thank you. And what's your name?
Kari?
Kari. Welcome. Glad to hear. Yeah, many of you have heard me talk about Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche in the past. Very young age, kind of tapped by the Dalai Lama to be the future of Buddhism, especially in the West, and spent many years as a Lama, and then ultimately disrobed, moved to Colorado in the 60s, basically, and brought Buddhism to Colorado in the 60s. So you can imagine what that was like. And Trungpa was a brilliant, crazy dude. In fact, the documentary is called Crazy Wisdom. So all of you who read Pema Chodron and think Pema Chodron is fantastic, this was Pema Chodron's teacher. He was crazy and did a lot of crazy, wild things that were not so wonderful, and also did a lot of things that were really wonderful. And he's built what today is known as really one of the largest Buddhist organizations in the world, which is Shambhala, and also founded Naropa Institute. And so just what one individual has done kind of for Buddhism in the Western world is really pretty remarkable. So I've never been out there, but I've always been just obsessed with it very beautifully. So
Our doors are always open.
yes, thank you. Glad you're here. All right, so with that, we'll start with a meditation practice. For those who are joining virtually as well, welcome. Thanks for being here. Feel free to say hello. The chat box somewhere on the screen. A couple things to tell you before we begin. Nothing's going to happen to you. You're not going to float away. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice, meaning don't ask yourself, is this working or not working? Are you doing it right or wrong? We're just going to sit. We're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside the room, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos. And this practice is learning to get quiet and still within all of the chaos. Posture is going to be comfortable. If you are in a cushion, often it helps slide in the front third, pushing the stomach forward. Allows the back to straighten, shoulders are relaxed, hands can be on the knees, on the lap, whatever's comfortable. I will guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. Most important, especially for those who are new, do not expect anything. Your mind's not going to shut off. It won't think nothing. It won't stop racing. We're just going to sit. We're going to breathe. And starting with the eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath, expecting nothing but to sit and breathe. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to breath. Where's your mind? Release that thought. Return to breath. Letting go of expectations. Letting go of judgments from your practice. Just sitting, breathing. Keeping the mind alert. Aware of each sound. Each thought. Each physical sensation. Yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. and no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. And once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And as you slowly open the eyes, slowly beginning to move. Most important, with the practice of meditation, is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, it's not from anything I said. It's not from how we sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's not from the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external situation. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samutpata, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awaken. He was a human being, no different than any one of us. He began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. What that means, very simply, for all of us, regardless where you come from or what you believe in or where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's it. That's what we get. This practice is simply learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to every other 20-minute period of your day. And so all we're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. It's not an easy practice. It's not necessarily fun. It's not an escape, as often people think it is. If your life is a crazy, hectic, stressed out mess, meditation doesn't fix that. It helps you become aware of your life that's a crazy, hectic, stressed out mess so you can actually make changes in your life. Meditation is direct perception into the present moment. The present moment, as we all know, is filled with conflict, chaos, difficulty, challenges. It's learning to be with life as it arises and not run from it, which is what many of us do for much of our lives. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. It's just sitting, breathing, becoming aware of what you think, what you say, and what you do in every moment. The Buddha called this karma. Karma is not what goes around, comes around. Karma is not getting what you deserve. Karma literally means action. And the Buddha taught that we cultivate and generate karma 3 ways: body, speech, mind, thoughts, words, and actions. So all of our thoughts, all of our words, and all of our actions that we bring into the world, this has an impact. Another way to look at karma is simply the law of cause and effect, but not based on what others deserve or what others didn't get or what others should do, based on what we think, what we say, and what we do, and how our thoughts, our words, and our actions impacting the world around us. Once we stop trying to change, fix, control, manipulate everything around us, and we work on changing our mind and our reaction, life gets a little simpler. And this doesn't mean you close your eyes and pretend there's not horrific, disgusting things going on in the world, because there are. Always has been, and there will be for a long time. This is not ignoring all of that. This is becoming very engaged in society and seeing how you can make a difference, but coming from a place of love and compassion, not from a place of anger and hatred. And this is the challenge. Can we engage in the world to make it a kinder, gentler place, coming from loving kindness and compassion? So with that, I'll pause. For me, always really just prefer to respond to questions. Meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with. And we'll use the rest of our brief time this evening for questions. To those who are joining virtually, again, welcome. Feel free to say hello in the chat box there. If you have a question, you can put it there and I'll do my best to respond. So we'll open up to questions. Yeah.
I was curious, are there any stories about Buddha having a sense of humor, or did he have a sense of humor?
Did the Buddha have a sense of humor?
Yeah.
I'm actually spending the first few moments of that question pondering if I've ever heard that question. It's a great question. Interesting, and I'll come back to your question, but for me as a Zen practitioner and having, studied from, learned from a lot of different Zen teachers, man, they're all funny. They're just making jokes. I think, before even getting to the Buddha part, I think it's important for us as, just unenlightened, ignorant folks, no offense to the enlightened ones in the room. See, like that, I think humor is important. And I think that, meditation, Buddhist practice, there is so much emphasis on the first thing the Buddha said, which is life is filled with suffering. I mean, that sounds miserable, right? Carla, right?
Yeah, once you accept it and come to peace with it and be the best person you can be, then just,
See? Why aren't you sitting up here?
I don't know, man.
But
2 or 3 more sessions.
2 or 3 more sessions. I get a night off. But this idea that Buddhism is all about suffering. Yes, we suffer a lot in our lives. Heavy traumatic suffering, death, loss, trauma, abuse. There's so much heavy stuff going on in our lives and in the world. but there's also a little suffering, just dukkha is the word, discomfort, angst, dissatisfaction, as you know, things that just don't go our way, our sandwich, or our coffee, whatever it is. And so I think as we explore from the Buddhist lens the cause of our suffering, which the Buddha taught us, greed, anger, ignorance, I think applying humor to that is incredibly important. Because if you just focus on suffering and you just focus on how miserable things are, that sucks. But if you can find humor in that, I mean, every single day I will laugh at just how ridiculous my head is. And some of the most ridiculous thoughts that pop into my head, I just laugh. Now, the practice is to not act on them, to not speak them, and to not act on them, but to be able to find humor in just the ridiculous nature of our minds. And I think to find humor in when it's appropriate, things that we have done that are just foolish. Again, when it's appropriate, because there are things that are not funny, that are not okay to laugh at. But there are many things in our lives that I can look back on and say, and laugh at just how stupid that was. And there are many things that I would never laugh at. But so I think humor is really important. To be able to laugh at yourself is important, right? This practice is all about getting to know the sense of self, and finding some humor in that is important. So I think, all these teachers, the Zen practitioners, the Tibetan lamas, I remember years ago, we had an old dog, Lily, and this was at the old Buddha Free location. And she was 12 when we got her from the shelter, rough life, whatever. We had her for 3 years. And so these, the monks from there are a lot of Thai Lao Bodhi temples down where the old Buddha Free was. And so, the head kind of Thai monk came in, and we asked him, if he could give Lily, our the old dog, a blessing. And so we thought he was going to do some chant or some mantra or some, really deep, beautiful Thailand, Buddhist prayer. And he leaned in, and his English was not so great. And he leaned in and he put his hand like this on Lily the dog and said, "Good dog, good dog." And that was it, So I just see humor throughout this. To your question of was the Buddha funny? I think the Buddha was just real. And so, I think the Buddha was real. And I think that when there were times that would have been appropriate for laughter, then, he was a guy. He was just a person, right? Wasn't it was just a person. And so I think the awareness of the emotions from his teachings are very clear. When there was sadness, to observe the sadness. When there was joy and happiness, to observe the joy and happiness. But to understand deeply the intention behind it. Because there are times where laughter can really harm, right? If someone laughing at us laughing at others, laughter can be harmful as well. So I think it's really important, just what I've learned from his teachings is to understand when and how to really explore the intention behind all of these emotions as they arise, and the impermanent nature of all of them, that they will pass. So, yeah.
I've only come, this is my second time
Yeah.
coming in the past couple weeks. As outside looking in, you project serenity and
Go ahead. Yeah.
Project.
Yeah.
I'm even projecting on you. A certain sense of sereneness.
Yeah.
Would you say that was a part of your disposition from you were younger, or is it cultivated as you have?
Did you hear that laughter? Yeah. I'll say this to, the projection of the sereneness. Yeah, this was not me. And the reality is, I think that without getting too much into my personal journey story, because I don't want to spend a lot of time on that, but no, I grew up in incredibly angry, filled, incredibly spoiled and privileged, right? Upper class, white, straight, Jewish male from Del Cerro. Had every privilege in the book, but was incredibly angry, filled with hatred and rage and violence and fights and trouble and was a bully. I mean, no joke. There was no serenity there. Even in my, friendships and, as a wonderful friend or thing like that, there was still this just constant state of anger. So there was no peace or serenity. And the reason that I kind of, the projection that you threw on me that you think I'm throwing on you, is it like two completely different people from today to what it was, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago? Absolutely. But you're always working on it. It's not like you get to me where you get to this place, you're like, I'm just there. I don't think, and I think that that's very potentially dangerous, especially for people who are new, because you'll read, and you'll see images of nuns and monks, and you read about these peaceful, beautiful stories and the way the images and the way it's portrayed. Life is raw, life is rough, life is harsh. And for me, the practice is, it's called the 4 Brahma Viharas, but the 4 foundations of mindfulness: loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. And for me, the practice of equanimity is really important. That can you be steady and at ease and at peace with the chaos? Because the chaos is never going to stop. But I often describe, for me, Buddhist practice is like, our life is very often this roller coaster ride. Chasing the highs and we come crashing down. Chasing the highs, we come crashing down, right? So Disneyland, Magic Mountain, whatever, just the highs and lows. And for me, the Buddhist practice is like getting on the kiddie ride. It's flat, goes around in a circle at about 2.2 miles an hour. And for the most part, unless somebody jumps off it, nobody gets hurt. And I found that is a very beautiful practice. But yeah, it's always a work in progress. But there's hope for you, man. I promise. What else? Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about karma? You mentioned it at the beginning, and I think there are like a lot of misinterpretations of karma, and I'm curious what that really means in Buddhist practice. And I was here last week when we were talking about rebirth.
Yeah.
And I appreciate your explanation about how that was kind of just the prevailing thought of the time, like that's what everybody thought.
Yeah.
And I know that karma is sometimes kind of tied to that, or it's so thought.
Sure.
But yeah, I'm curious kind of what his role is today. And
yeah, so the question, just for those virtual maybe didn't hear it, was just additional thoughts on what karma is. And then you said you heard last week where I talked about rebirth and really maybe the connection potentially between the two. And you shared that how I shared last week, at the time of the Buddha, for the most part, everybody believed in rebirth. So it was just, that was what was going on at that time. And obviously it's not so much today in Western countries. But let me kind of talk about karma first, and I'll separate them out a little bit. Karma is one of the most misinterpreted Buddhist words that exists. For the most part, especially in a Western culture, which is really all I can speak to, people here think karma is what? Goes around, comes around. That's a very selfish view of karma, because that makes karma all about whom? You. And that it's all about me. And so often we say this kind of expression of, well, they're going to get what's coming to them. That's their karma. They're going to get what they deserve. That's not karma. Karma, as I said earlier, to repeat this piece of it, it literally means action. So have you ever played pool? Yeah, so the white ball hits the rack, the cue ball goes into the rack. Every ball goes into a different direction every time the cue ball hits the rack. Our entire lives, we are that cue ball. Every person, place, and thing we interact with, we leave an imprint on. And so karma is not what we get, it's what we give. It's not about this it's a misunderstanding of the word, but Western people, however we want to use it, that's fine. But literally what karma is action, and it's what we give, not what we get. And I think it's important also to understand that, from this kind of what goes around comes around. You ever done anything good and had bad things happen to you?
Yes.
all the time.
All the time. You ever done bad stuff and had good things happen to you? So that right there rules out this idea that, well, if you do good, you're going to get good. Or if you do bad, you're going to get bad. Karma is what we give. It's not what we get. And from that perspective, there's an expression that says, be mindful of your karma, not because of what's going to come back to you. Again, that's a very Western, like, karma's all about me. But if I am kinder and gentler and more pleasant with people, there is a better chance that that's going to create kinder and gentler, more pleasant situations. Doesn't guarantee it. I could be kind and gentle, pleasant, and people could still be, it could still be met with a lot of pain and negativity. And that's an opportunity to then continue to double down on being kinder and gentler and more pleasant. So it really is what we give. I think it's also, well, yeah, I'll pause there. But does that make sense so far on karma?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so then this idea of how is that tied into rebirth, technically, without getting too far into it again, is what's called a Laya Vijnana storehouse consciousness, that it is a collection of our karma, a collection of our actions that continues on, but not in this like judgment way. I tend to look at, as I talked about, anytime I talk about rebirth, no different than you know, when the class is done here shortly, you're going to get up and where? You're going to go out the door, right? So rebirth is no different than you have, what's your name?
Robin.
No different than Robin saying, hey, I have a thought. My thought is I'm going to stand up if I'm able. I'm going to go get my shoes if they're still there. Maybe somebody stole them, right? And I'm going to go outside. Those are your thoughts. And then that will be followed by actions, and maybe there'll be some words. Excuse me, can I grab my shoes? Whatever it is. But that's your karma. It's what you're bringing, and that will put you outside. Rebirth, same thing. It'll put you somewhere. Yeah.
I think like in that, some have thought that like your karma goes with you, kind of, you know, going back to what comes around goes around. If you're a bad person, then you're going to be reborn as a cockroach, or, you know, something.
Understood.
Something like that, because you've like done that, and that's your karma.
Oh, yes.
So
Oh, yeah.
Was that totally
No, that's true.
bogus?
Potentially true. But what I want to point out is that the mistake in that view, right, especially early on when you begin to explore this stuff, which is great, that's where you're at, is thinking that it's yours, that it's your karma. That if you, Robin, do something bad, then you, Robin, are going to be reborn somewhere else. It's not Robin. This goes into the teachings of non-self. You are just a collection of past consciousness, past karma that has continued, that is now in your physical body. Think of it as, and I don't think I used this example last time, but think of it as if you have a rag, or you have a cup, sorry, and you have tea, and you shatter the cup, right? Cup's shattered. Tea is on your hand, it's on your knee, it's on the floor. You take a rag, you wipe it up, you wring it out, it's still tea. The tea has moved 7 different places, but it hasn't changed. Tea is still tea. Just the cup shatters. You are the cup. You will shatter when you die. Your body at some point in time will cease to exist. But your consciousness, your Alaya Vijnana, your storehouse consciousness, which is a collection, an accumulation of all of your actions, will continue on. But it's not Robin's. So you, Robin, don't have to worry about being reborn as anything, because it's not you who's being reborn. If you are one who really studies this, and again, for those who are new to Buddhism, you don't have to believe in this stuff. You don't have to like buy into this to practice Buddhism. Just for me, think about rebirth as moment to moment or day to day, right? If you want tomorrow to be a pleasant day, there's a better chance if you're pleasant today that tomorrow will be a pleasant day. You ever woken up and been in a really good mood? How long does that last? Not that long. And then you're in a bad mood. And how long does that last? Maybe a little bit longer, but it still changes. So our moods, moment to moment, a great way to think about rebirth is, and these realms of rebirth and where they are, which again, yes, was taught at that time. 6 realms of existence, from heaven realms to hell realms, animal realms to hungry ghost realms. They're all there. Those aren't things that were like made up. Those are very fundamental technical Buddhist teachings that existed at the time of the Buddha. So it's not like they're wrong in saying those things, that you could be reborn, but you, Robin, read it as, I, Robin, am going to be reborn as a cockroach. It's just your consciousness will go somewhere. Just like it was somewhere before. And you were born and somebody said, let's call this person Robin. And that consciousness was with you. But now you own it and you think, well, where am I going next? You're not going anywhere. You're not even here. And this won't answer this stuff. It's not like you answer, this stuff, this is like, just study it forever. And keep asking questions and keep exploring and keep not understanding. My teacher always said, when you ask questions, don't expect answers, don't look for answers, just continue to ask questions. And you keep learning, So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Go ahead.
This kind of relates, recently came across something called NDE, near-death experiences, where people talk about having a near-death experience where they go out of their body and experience the feelings and I guess the karmic things of what they did to other people and how other people felt.
Sure.
Is there any correlation or connection?
It's really, anytime anyone asks around near-death experience stuff, it's, I can't experience half the stuff I'm talking about. And especially something like that, all I can say is that, each culture has different traditions, beliefs. Each religion has different beliefs, but I wouldn't tie those two together. For me, this idea of rebirth, we're reborn in every moment. And this idea of a near-death experience is also occurring every moment. And I think from a practical standpoint, these questions around like rebirth, and they're all fun to ponder. But for me, the question isn't like, what happens when we die? Where do we go when we die? What's our fear of dying? How are you living? To me, that's the most beautiful thing of this practice, is focused on how am I living? Because if I'm going to go to this place or that place when I'm dead, what's going to determine that is what I'm doing now anyways. It's the same thing with kind of the near-death stuff. Like, we escape death every single day, every single moment. We are one breath away from done. So yeah. What else? Yeah.
So I'm just curious, so like when the Buddha went through his life and he was enlightened and stuff like that, like about suffering and about like when he started, just not eating for 40-something days and getting up, like I'm not food, I don't need food, I can go through this and I'm not going to die because of this. But did he get enlightened so like he didn't have to go through that again? So like when in life, like if I get cancer this time and I accept it and I'm like, it is what it is and I'll die and I'll go forward. Do I have to suffer cancer again next time? Is the cue ball going to hit the balls and it's like once again in life, this is what it is, it's a free for all.
Yeah. So a couple things. It's not you. So you have to try to remove this. Am I going to go through it again?
Okay.
Because it's not you. You have an idea of you. But aside from that, also going back to your example, that does not correlate at all, because in the way you phrased that, that was not the Buddha who was starving himself to death thinking he didn't need to eat. That was Siddhartha Gautama, who became called the Buddha. And at that time, he almost died. So the emaciated Buddha, for those who don't know the story, the emaciated Buddha behind me, this is the Buddha prior to his awakening. A brief story for those who don't know it. 29, he was raised in a palace. I'll sum this up in 3 minutes. He's raised in a palace. He's a prince, all the wealth, all the riches, everything. 29 years old, he sneaks out with his attendant Chana, his buddy, and he says, he sees old age, sickness, and death, and an ascetic, like a nun or a monk. And it happens over a series of 4 visits, but for time's sake, together, he sees these 4 things: old age, sickness, death, and an ascetic. And he says to Chana, does this happen to all of us? And Chana says, yes, my Lord, we all age, we all get sick, we all die. Because his father wanted him to be a great king and not, go on to be the Buddha. And so they kept him sheltered. They didn't want him to see these things. They knew he had a big heart. And if he saw old age, sickness, and death, he wouldn't want to be a king and rule and kill people. But he sees these things, leaves in the middle of the night, 29 years old. For 6 years, he roams the base of the Himalayan mountains. During that time, as yogis in that time in India, I'm not a historian, I'm not a scholar, I don't study Buddhism this way, but enough to know that at that time, one of the things they did was do these very kind of austere yogi practices. And at that time, for the most part, in Hindu Vedic beliefs, they thought that if they overcame attachment to physical form, that was the way to awakening. So they starved themselves to death, close to death. They lived on what's said 1 grain of rice a day. And they were so skinny, he was so skinny that you could take your fingers front to back and they would touch, right? The way, I'm going to keep going here, but I just want to point this out because the way you asked your question was almost as if he was doing it right. No, he almost died. Came to a riverbed, somebody offered him food and said, here, have some food. And all his buddies were like, no, we don't eat. We're, trying to overcome attachment to the body. And Siddhartha said something to the effect of, well, I'm hungry. And so he took the bowl and he set it in the river and said, if the bowl goes against the stream, I'm going to eat. So he puts it in the river, the bowl goes against the stream, and he begins to eat. All his buddies are like, you're a food eater, you're a sellout, They left him, and then he begins to regain his health, right? This is what's called the middle path in Buddhism. For all of us, I'll touch on this maybe in a minute, but find a balance in your life. It's not about starvation. It's not about eating in excess. For all of you who think the big belly guy is the Buddha, that was not the Buddha. That was a monk named Hotai, lived in China about 1,000 years ago. Was very wealthy, very prosperous, very lucky, carried around a big bag of toys and gifts and gave stuff out to people. Sound familiar, right? That was not the Buddha. So he starts to eat again. Continues on his journey, eventually sits down under the Bodhi tree in Bodh Gaya, India at 35 years old, and says, I'm not moving until I figure out why we suffer. So he sat for 21 days, and he began to understand why we suffer. And he understood all suffering comes from the nature of his mind. And then at that moment where they say he had the awakening, he thought to himself, nobody's going to understand this. I can't teach this. Nobody will get it. Brahma, the Hindu god, as it's told, came down and said to him, there are people with little dust in their eyes. Go teach. Some of them will understand. So he got up. Actually, he kind of stayed there. That tapestry above the exit sign by the door there, that is called the first turning of the Dharma wheel, where he gave the first teaching to the same 5 disciples. They were his first 5 disciples. Those were the guys he was with that left him. And he taught the 4 noble truths. Life is filled with suffering. Second one is the cause. The third is the ending. And the 4th is the path, the Eightfold Path. Correct views, thought, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, concentration, all of that on Google for free, right? Then he taught for 45 years. And then he died at 80. Statue 18 years ago when we opened this temple because it was us. We were not these awakened beings trying to live in this perfect Buddha realm. We were physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally near death. And we needed to find balance. So we picked that statue to be our main statue because we connect with where he was at that time, which was unhealthy. So back to your question, it doesn't correlate that way. Someone who has a disease right now has that disease. It's not about conquering that disease so next time you don't have to go through it. It's not you. If someone has any disease whatsoever, it is not pleasant. That is not fun. It is traumatic. It is terrible. But it's where we are. And so how can we be in that moment? Not how can we be in that moment so we don't have to deal with it again. That thinking won't get you anywhere. How can we be with each thing as it arises? Because life is rough. And can we approach each moment of health and sickness with loving kindness and compassion towards ourselves and others? And can we appreciate each moment? That's, to me, what this teaching is about. The Buddha said we age, we get sick, and we die. And you cannot escape it. So there's no pleasant answer to your question, but I wanted to very clearly identify that it's not about taking care of it now so you don't have to go through it again. Life hurts. So appreciate every second. And for all of us, the anger, the resentment, the fear, the stuff that we're holding on to that just destroys you, every moment, we're one moment away from it being done. So the heart that is closed, the people you won't forgive, the resentments that you carry, is it really worth it? And that's for each person to figure out on their own. So with that, I'm going to close. We'll join palms. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all beings be at peace and free from suffering. May any merit gains be transferred to Pam during her time of suffering, and to Mark, his family who suffers at this time, and to Billy as he continues to heal. May we all be at peace and free from suffering. All right, before you all head out, our host Eddie has a few announcements. And while Eddie's coming up, we are looking for a volunteer Tuesdays, noon to 1, if anybody wants to hit a bell and learn how to open and close the temple and have the ability to break in and steal everything in here. We could really use a volunteer Tuesdays, noon to 1, let me know.
Hello, everyone. My name is Eddie. I'm tonight's host. We opened the Dharma Bum Temple 18 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those who lead are not nuns, monks, gurus, masters, or teachers, and are not looking for students. They are simply practitioners sharing their interpretation of the practice. Every night we have different classes led by different people from various Buddhist traditions. We have a recovery sangha that meets several times a week for anyone with addiction problems, and our food redistribution program meets every Thursday at 4:30 p.m. We have classes and programs every day, and everything we offer here is always free. The full schedule is on our website and posted in the entryway above the shoe rack. We have a lending library. If you see a book you like, feel free to borrow it and bring it back whenever you are done with it. Please straighten your seat or cushion before you head out. If a few people could stay to close and latch the windows, that would be helpful. Thank you for being here. We wish you well and hope to see you all again.
Thanks, Eddie.